Mike Pachelli here. Thanks for tuning into this lesson. I'll be talking about the Beatles recording of Paperback Writer that they did on April 13th and 14th of 1966. Now in early 66, the Beatles were due to release another 45. There was kind of an unwritten agreement that they would release 4 singles and 2 albums per year. But by the time Paperback Writer is released, it's 27 weeks since their previous 45, Day Tripper and We Can Work It Out. So it looks like they'll no longer hit the 4 singles and 2 albums per year. Nevertheless, the competition begins between John and Paul to see who will get the A side of the next 45. Now it was Paul's Aunt Lil who asked Paul, "Why do you always write songs about love? Can't you write about something more interesting?" So on March 6th, Paul begins writing Paperback Writer. Paul goes over John's house and they decide to make the lyrics a letter to somebody. Paul writes the majority of the lyrics and John, nods approvingly when Paul hits on something that he likes. When they get the letter finished, they go upstairs to John's studio and they bang out the music on John's piano. Now in those days, they were heavily inspired by marijuana and Indian music. So they were trying to write a song on 1 chord. They almost succeeded because Paperback Writer for the most part has 2 chords, G and C. It also has some implied chords on the a cappella section. So they go into the studio on April 13th into EMI, and it takes them only 2 takes to get the rhythm track of Paperback Writer recorded. But this time it's a different lineup. It's Paul on lead guitar, George Harrison on bass, John Lennon on rhythm, and Ringo on drums. It takes them 6 hours to get Paul's lead vocal and to get that a cappella section done. Now on the a cappella section, which begins the song, and you know it quite well, they use Ken Townsend's artificial double tracking. And what that is they're connected to 2 tape recorders at the same time. One is the main recorder and the second one is on a various speed. And by changing the speed of the second tape recorder and putting it into the same line, you can get a few milliseconds difference between the 2 recordings. And those milliseconds kind of simulates what it would be like if they actually double tracked the vocals. So on April 14th, they go back in the studio and they do some guitar overdubs. George does, but most of them were never used. George's double tracking on his Gibson SG is heard on 1 or 2 of the main riffs of the song. And George plays some rhythm on the end of the track on the fade out. Ringo also overdubbed an odd tambourine part on April 14th that happens on the end of every measure. And they record those background vocals where they're singing Farah Jaka, kind of like a row, row, row your boat that mimics the row, row, row your boat-ness of the a cappella section. And unfortunately, they had to use the track that George recorded his bass when he played his Burns New Sonic bass. So they wiped out George's bass track in order to do the row, row, row your boat or the Farah Jaka background vocal. George Martin also tried to do a organ part on the song, but the Beatles rejected that part. Now, then they also re-recorded Paul's bass track. And I've talked about it in great detail on my Rain lesson. But basically what they did is, a microphone is basically a loudspeaker that's wired in reverse. So they figured, why can't we take a loudspeaker, wire it in reverse, and use a loudspeaker as a microphone? And that's what they did. And they put the loudspeaker in front of Paul's cabinet to capture the bass more efficiently. And that's why the bass on Paperback Writer is really, really prominent. The song should have been released on Revolver, but instead it was as a 45. They did play Paperback Writer live on their 66 American and International tour. And there's footage of it in Japan where while they're doing the a cappella part, George waves his hand to get the audience kind of screaming, perhaps to overshadow the fact that the 3-part harmony they were doing live wasn't as full as the 5-part harmony on the record. Nevertheless, it was released as a 45 on May 30th, 66, and then on the Hey Jude album, it came out in 1970. Well, I think that's the backstory for Paperback Writer, so let's get started. Paul McCartney is playing his Epiphone Casino on Paperback Writer, similar to this one, but his was sunburst back in those days and also left-handed. But first I'd like to talk about the chords they're singing over during that really cool a cappella part. It would be a C to a G to an A minor to a D7 suspended. Because the last notes that 5-part harmony ends up on are A, C, D, E, and a G. You know, right? So if you think of that as a D chord, you have the 5th of D, the 7th of D, the root of D, the 9th of D, and the suspension of D. I also like to think of that chord as a F major 7, 6, 9. So if you play it like that. Because if I play an F major 7th, you know, you can go. Nice sound. But for our purposes, we'll call that a D7 suspended. Okay? Now to get Paul's hellacious sound on the Paperback Writer, I'm using a Marshall Plexi, pretty much dimed out in the studio. Thank goodness it's soundproof. And 1963 AC30 with an RC booster. And the riff that you've heard so many times goes like this. Right? Now, Paul being the improvisationalist that he is, there's 5 versions of that riff in Paperback Writer. So we'll call the main one version 1. And it sounds again like this, very slowly. It's pretty much just like based on a G power chord, you know, the root and 5th of G, and you get the 7th. But let me explain it a little further. You play a low G on the 3rd fret of the 6th string, and you hammer from the 3rd to the 5th of the 5th string, get another G on the 5th fret of the D string. That's the first part. And then it's just some back and forth between like the 6th and the 4th string to get a G to F. Get a low G again, a C, a low G, another C, hammered on, to an F. Right? Very slow. There'll be charts and tabs at MikePachelli.com for the entire song if I don't explain it clear enough for you. Okay, again, we'll call that riff 1, the main riff that he uses. For the rhythm, it's pretty much a power G chord, rock and roll like Chuck Berry, G and a D. And then on beat 4, with the pinky, you grab the 6th of the chord. So let me get it in tempo. It's about 156, I think. So I'll play his first riff, and then I'll play a verse. So it goes like this. He slides up to the C. Thank you, Ringo. Slides up to the C and basically does the same move. And then he plays what I'll call version 2 of the riff, and it's just he leaves out the last low G. It goes like this. I'll play it slow. Instead of getting the last little G. So the main riff is version 2 of the riff is. Got that? Pretty simple stuff. Then he goes back for verse 2. Paul plays the regular Chuck Berry rhythm. At the end of verse 2, Paul plays what I'll call riff 3, which he just plays the first part of the riff. He just goes like that. But we hear George Harrison on his overdub, part of his overdubbing. Sometimes he doubles this riff on his Gibson SG. He goes to the F. So Paul goes and stays there, but But George on the overdub goes, okay, he continues with a little more of the riff. All right, so Paul's number 3, and then George's overdub is, all right? And then they do the a cappella section for the second time. After that, Paul comes in with the first version of the riff, which again is, but then he plays what I'll call version 4 of the riff, and it's simply he stays on the D at the end, doesn't go all the way up to the F. So he plays version 4, which would be, just stays on there instead of going, just stays on the D. So version 4 is, stays there, okay? Then verse 3, the same basic Chuck Berry rock and roll. You know, it's a little looser, but it's pretty much just 2 quarter notes and 4 eighth notes. You know, right? When he gets to the C, you know, slide to the C. And then I'll call this version 5 of the riff, because it's a little different. It goes like this. I'll do it slow. See that? It's a little different. And he uses that version 5 before the outro. Verse 4 is the same Chuck Berry, you know, just loose rock play, have fun doing it, you know. Of course, up the tempo, slides up to the C. And this time Paul doesn't play riff, he just plays a dotted quarter to a eighth tied. So he just goes. All right, so let me go in tempo from the C, like that. Thank you, Ringo. It was just like him. And then that would be the third a cappella part that they do. And then Paul comes back in with version 5 of the riff that I'm calling it. And again, that one was, right? Charts and tabs at MikePachelli.com to see it a lot clearer, I'm sure. And after that, they do the fade out, paperback writer, and Paul just rock and rolls the Chuck Berry style. You know, again, give me the tempo so I don't play too fast. Yeah. You get it. So that's all the parts. It's, you know, it's just simple and fun, basic rock and roll, but it's just so effective, you know, put together the way only the Beatles could. So that's all the parts you need to play Paperback Writer, just like Paul McCartney. John Lennon is playing his Gretsch 6120 on Paperback Writer. Similar to this guitar, but his was orange, but it has similar pickups, so it's easy to get the same sound. For the tone, I'm using a 1967 Fender Princeton Reverb with the tremolo on about half and the volume right where the speaker begins to slightly break up. So this is a cool song because if you're a complete beginner or a novice, you could pretty much get this exactly like John Lennon, because you just need 2 chords to play the song. You need a G, and you need a C. And for the most part, John is just playing the upper strings. He may even be strumming upwards, but you just want to get pretty much the G, the B, and the E string, you know, sound like that. He doesn't play during the intro, he only plays on the verses, and he just plays on beat 2. That's it. So if you have the metronome going about the right speed, you'd count like, you know, sir, oh, madam, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1. 1. Thank you, Ringo. And that's the parts he plays on every verse. The only difference is at the very end on the fade out, he's playing a little more. He plays a little free strumming, but basically you voice the G chord, you play a low string, and then up you go like 1, 2, 3, and 4, and. So again, with the metronome close to the tempo, it's just this for the fade out. 1, 2, 3, 4. Just a simple, fun part that anybody can play, just like John Lennon. Okay, for fun, I've put it all together in a sound-alike so you can learn both parts and play along with me, and you'll get it just like the Beatles. So let's check this out. Paperback, Well, I hope you enjoyed that, and like I suggest, learn both parts, play along with my sound-alike, and you'll get it just like the Beatles. If you'd like to drop me a line, do so at MikePachelli.com. That's where the charts and tabs are for all my video lessons. So have fun playing this great song, and until next time, I'm Mike Pachelli. Thanks for hanging out with me. Paperback, paperback.